Dimitri, let's start with BRICS Summit on October. We're gonna have BRICS Summit in Russia, in Kazan. And how how do you see this BRICS Summit? It seems that Russia is already talking with India, with China, with everybody right now. And first of all, how do you see this city? What's the importance of this city for this summit?
Well, the city Kazan, it's the capital of Tatarstan, which is a Muslim republic right in the heart of Russia on the Volga River. It was one of the early acquisitions prior to Russia becoming an empire. Ivan the Fantastic, sometimes called the Terrible, uh, won it in a battle. And after that, the floodgates were open to integrating what was left of the Golden Horde with the Muscovy, the Principality of Muscovy, creating this kind of hybrid society, part Christian Orthodox, part Muslim, which cemented the ties between East and West for pretty much for all of time within Russia. So it is a city that represents this combination of East, which is the Muslim world, and West, not too far west, but only as far west as Constantinople, which is the Christian realm, the Eastern Christian realm, not the Catholic or the Protestant, but the Orthodox Christian realm. So the fact that BRICS is meeting in Kazan represents this fusion, not just of East and West within Russia, but also the South, which is now merging. And I expect a lot to come of this meeting. One of the expectations is that concrete proposals will be made for replacing toxic currencies, the US dollar and the euro, with some sort of a combination of BRICS currencies, perhaps with some elements of blockchain, um, perhaps with some stable coin that will be produced as a combination of something backed by gold, something backed by other types of material reserves, such as oil and natural gas, and a basket of currencies of BRICS members. So I expect that that proposal or a set of proposals will move forward. It's a very delicate negotiation because defining a unit of value that applies to everyone is not at all a trivial thing. But it's been in the works for quite a while, and now is the time because um, just recently the United States has crossed a certain Rubicon financially. The amount of money it pays in interest expense on its federal debt has exceeded its expenditure on defense. Now, if you look at the Habsburg Empire, if you look at the British Empire, if you look at the Russian Empire, and now you look at the American Empire, that is the threshold beyond which empires generally collapse. It is when they pay more in interest on their debt than they can afford to pay for defense. That threshold has now been crossed by the United States this year. And so everybody should prepare for the United States dollar to basically do some sort of a disappearing act. And since the euro is sort of a mini-me to the United States dollar, we don't expect the euro to do very well either. So now is the time for that. The other problem is that the United Nations is still a needed organization in spite of all of its flaws, but there's a major problem with it. It is on U.S. territory, which makes it possible for the U.S. to deny visas to various diplomats from various countries and pull various other undiplomatic stunts, since the United States doesn't really understand the meaning of the word diplomacy anymore. And so BRICS is an alternative new UN, which excludes the United States, which excludes Western Europe. And so there's an entire line of people, a queue of nations trying to get into BRICS for that reason, because they don't want to be left out and they don't want to have to trust the UN when the UN becomes this this strange servant of a failing American empire. So I think it's a very important meeting, and I think a lot of business will be done there. A lot of major breakthroughs will be accomplished.
Yeah. The city of Kazan, as you mentioned, is is one of the cities of majority Muslims. And when you look at the recent terrorist attack in Dagestan, in which it seems that they're trying to draw a line between Muslims, Christians, they're trying to do everything to make some sort of problems within Russia. And how did you find this terrorist attack?
Well, the problem is that there's a legacy of various terrorist networks and cells that were originally built by the United States with some involvement from the Brits. ISIS was a U.S. creation, and a lot of people from these uh, uh, republics, some within Russia, some outside Russia, Muslim republics, fought in Syria, and then they went back to Russia and became dormant. And these cells can be reactivated by the CIA or the MI6 and made to perform terrorist acts. So most likely this is what has happened. These are remnants that weren't cleaned out at the time because apparently a couple of the key members of this particular little sect were the sons of a political leader in Dagestan who didn't, apparently he's under arrest now, but he failed to inform the authorities of the wayward leanings of his very own sons. That is perhaps forgivable. Few fathers really want to report on their sons, but as a figure of authority, he was obligated to. And so his fate is probably not going to be very happy. But overall, this is an extended cleanup effort that is probably part of the aftermath of the entire ISIS episode, where where the CIA and the Pentagon competed on how many terrorist cells and terrorist groups and organizations they could put together, and using people from the Central Asian republics and from the Russian Federation. It's a very unfortunate thing that this happened, but I think Dagestan will recover. I don't think any permanent damage was done except for one priest who was unfortunately shot. He was one of the very first victims, but he was quite old, and so he's the one clear martyr in the entire event.
Yeah. The other attack was Ukrainian attack on Sevastopol and killing children. How, in your opinion, how we can understand this behavior on the part of Ukrainians together with their allies?
Well, first of all, the Ukrainians don't know how to program these rockets. Only the Americans know how to load the files into them, so the targeting was done by Americans. The fact that there was some jubilation on the Ukrainian side and some words to the effect of people in Crimea having no business being on the beach since they're occupiers, that sort of thing. Well, that's just typical Ukrainian Nazi rhetoric and can be disregarded as such. They're always making some kind of nasty noise. But the fact is that these are cluster munitions, which are forbidden under international treaty, and that Americans specifically targeted the beach. So the rocket exploded, releasing its load of cluster munitions over a popular beach. Not only that, but this was done on a holiday, which is a holy day both for the Christians and for the Muslims. For the Christians, it's the Feast of the Holy Trinity. And so a lot of people were celebrating it by going to the beach. It was a very good, nice summer day, and everybody was at the beach, and suddenly these cluster munitions started popping it and all over the place, and the videos are available. It's not like anybody can deny that this actually happened. So here's the fact that the United States is um, is targeting families and children at the beach in Russia, which makes the United States into a terrorist state. So what is Russia to do with a terrorist state? Well, it must be destroyed. The question is how and when. And these being Russians, they're going to take their revenge. There's no avoiding Russia's revenge, but it will be served very, very cold. In fact, the Americans at that point may not even be in a position to recognize the fact that this is revenge and this is Russia's revenge. But they will definitely be made to feel the effects of this. As far as Russia going for some sort of silly Israeli-style escalation, where the escalation is worse than the provocation that provoked it, don't expect the Russians to fall for that. They do not fall for provocations. You cannot provoke them directly. They just add a certain transgression to their list of transgressions to be avenged eventually when the United States is at its weakest.
Yeah. And when it comes to the response coming from the Russian government, from the Putin administration, do you think that they're thinking of handing some sort of assistance to, let's say, Houthis, let's say groups who are fighting with the United States, who are so important right now in this battle between Israel and Gaza?
Well, this is very difficult for us to judge because the information is top secret, if it exists at all, if anything has been decided. Nobody will be informed of this. So this is just musings on our part. But we can talk about strategy, what Russia's strategy might be. And a reasonable strategy would be to produce attacks on US facilities around the world. Probably not diplomatic facilities because diplomacy is a category of its own, but certainly military facilities, um, military bases around the world, and the manner in which these attacks should proceed should provide Russia with plausible deniability. That is, nobody should be able to prove or even allege that Russia was behind these attacks. Nobody knows why this particular group of people who didn't like the fact that there's an American Army base or a Navy base or drone base on their territory, nobody could actually understand how they got hold of these incredibly sophisticated precision method weapons that were used to target and destroy this facility, killing lots of Americans. It's just something that happened. It's one of those funny things, you know. Now, what the Russians did was they sold their weapons to somebody, and that somebody sold their weapons to somebody else, and lo and behold, an American military facility got demolished, and hundreds of Americans died. But Russia wasn't behind it. Russia was just selling some weapons. If Americans can provide weapons to Ukrainian terrorists, why can't Russia provide weapons to whatever other people it wants to provide weapons to, who can then sell it to whoever they want? You know, there's what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and there's no country in the world that is more defenseless for such attacks than the United States, with its hundreds of completely useless at this point military bases scattered all over the planet for no other reason than to produce lots of money, lots of income for all kinds of different defense contractors. So once they start getting hit, I think America's military posture will quickly start to change.
Yeah. Dmitry, how do you see the recent comment of Emmanuel Macron? He said that he's trying to talk with Russians, but they're not responding to him. And do you think the time the time is up for Macron in the eyes of the Russians in Putin administration? That's why they're not gonna talk with him.
Well, look, Macron made a terrible mistake. He talked confidentially with Putin and then released this information, leaked this information to the press. And so not even Putin himself, but the staff at the Kremlin basically crossed Macron off the list of people to talk to permanently. You only make that mistake once as far as the Kremlin is concerned. So the only reason Macron is not aware of this fact is because he is definitely some sort of a deranged narcissist who can only think of himself as some sort of an exalted person that anybody in the world should feel privileged to talk to. And the fact that Putin doesn't want to pay any attention to him is to him an imponderable. It's something that cannot possibly exist because here he is, little Emmanuel, the most wonderful person in the world. And if somebody doesn't want to talk to him, then there's something wrong with that person. You know, that person is crazy to not want to talk to Emmanuel. And so this shows that the level of degradation of political elites in Europe has reached a certain threshold where they're not even bureaucrats. You'd understand if they were just unelected bureaucrats that the Americans sort of stuck in charge of this collapsing European thing. But bureaucrats don't behave like that. Bureaucrats are secretive. Bureaucrats hide their lies in a pile of paper. And these people come out with their lies and repeat them endlessly in front of cameras. And when it's pointed out that they're lying, they shut down the internet resource or the television channel that reports their lies because they're so fragile at this point that anybody who speaks the truth in their presence shatters their egos. And so Macron is a really good example. But if you look at Ursula von der Leyen, for instance, similar case. You know, she thinks that she's doing a great job imposing sanctions on Russia that are boosting Russia's economy while destroying the European economy. But don't tell her that because it'll shatter her fragile little elderly ego. And she will never be the same again. You know, she'll start to stutter or something. You know, she'll have an aneurysm.
The other thing is this decision on the part of the European Union together with the United States to send the first tranche of the frozen Russian asset and to the pocket of the military-industrial complex in the United States in order to send weapons to Ukraine. And we've learned that the foreign minister of Hungary said that they're just bypassing Hungary's opinion on this matter. And he was calling a shameless violation of red lines what the European Union is doing right now. Do you find Hungary honest in what they're talking about? They can't do anything within the European Union, or the European Union is just ignoring what they're talking about?
Well, first of all, the idea of stealing Russia's money um, and getting away with it shows just how clueless these people have become. Because Russia has more than ample European reserves belonging to Western individuals and companies and governments that it can claim as its own in response. So, as a tit for tat game, Europe loses twice. Once because it loses the money, because the Russians will simply take an equivalent portion of Western reserves held in Russia. And secondly, the reputational damage that the European Union will suffer as a result is incalculable, because what sane country would now keep its reserves in Western banking institutions, knowing that on a whim they might not even be frozen for the duration of hostilities, for instance, which does happen, as has happened, and is understandable in some way, but actually stolen, outright stolen, and that's a new one. Nobody really wants to deal with thieves, and this is what they've done. They've established that they're thieves. As far as Orban, well, Orban has laid bare the lie of the European Union being any sort of a democracy where various countries have a say. So basically, you have a say as long as you vote with everyone, and if you don't vote with everyone, you no longer have a vote. That's how it works in the European Union, and Orban has unearthed this little fact. The entire European Union, is an unelected substance of some sort that is controlled from across the Atlantic.
These are huge tensions within the European Union that would make these countries so unhappy that they may go asking for BRICS because they are in the European Union. But we know that at the end of the day, who decides about everything? G7, these United States together with United Kingdom, France, Germany, these are important players. Countries like Hungary, Serbia, these are marginal countries. Nobody cares what they're talking about. But coming to BRICS would give them an advantage to talk, to just have a leverage on what they're doing in the European Union.
Well, I think that Orban is going to be rather careful. You see, he gets a bunch of money from the EU. Hungary is a donor nation within the EU, in spite of everything. And Orban has done quite a lot to jeopardize that position. But he doesn't want to lose that money because that would make him unpopular. Uh, Not only that, but in the recent elections in Hungary, his party didn't do all that well. So he has to be careful there as well, because Hungary is relatively open to the West, and its electoral system could easily be manipulated by various transnational organizations. That Hungary would be very difficult, would find it very difficult to block out. And so I think Orban tries relatively hard to find a way for Hungary within the European Union. And the fact that this isn't working is more of a political problem for Orban than anything else. I don't think that it means that Hungary will rush into BRICS and make a big show of it and then be denied the funds that it receives from Brussels. I don't see that as something that is on strategy for him.
Yeah. The other thing is right now it seems that in Le Monde and CNN, Voice of America, many mainstream media in the West, they're talking about that she is not happy with Putin's visit to North Korea. And do you find any sort of basis for this type of talks, for this type of reporting on their part, or they're just making noises?
Oh, they're just making noises. I think that this was discussed in great detail between Xi and Putin, and I think that China and Russia are maneuvering North Korea into position as something, an asset to both of them, because in their opposition to the United States, because the Americans are poker players. They think of everything in terms of bluffing and betting. And North Korea and Kim Jong-un in particular is what in poker is a joker, a wild card, unpredictable, a tiny country with nuclear weapons that always does the unexpected, that cannot really be dealt with the way Americans are used to dealing with little countries. And so both Russia and China can use UN to make it impossible for the Americans to bluff against them. Because you don't bluff against someone who has lots of jokers up their sleeve or in their hand. And that's basically what that is. Now, there are a lot of other things that people are reading into it. There are Chinese banks that are having trouble dealing with both the Americans and the Russians at the same time. There are a few problems with transferring payments between Russia and China, with parallel imports going through China to Russia. Various little issues like that, but these are all little trade issues that are resolvable. There's also a bit of a problem within China because while Russia has really quashed its pro-Western fifth columnists, there's still quite a lot of people within China that are US educated and US trained and have a lot of connections with the US and aren't really comfortable with the fact that China is cutting itself off and drifting away from the United States. And this is a problem that has nothing to do with North Korea or with Russia. This is something that China has to sort out within itself, and the process will, of course, take time. But I don't see any big problem brewing between China and Russia.
And the areas of cooperation between Russia and North Korea, in your opinion, beside the military-industrial complex that they can contribute a lot, both of the countries, they can contribute to each other. And the other area would be the agricultural products. And we know that they have a lot of problems in North Korea. And this production of food that just grains is so important for North Korea. How do you see this area of cooperation between Russia and North Korea?
Well, in terms of military cooperation, North Korea has fabulous rockets that go hypersonic. It's one of the few countries, one of 4 countries in the world, Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, that have hypersonic rockets. But it doesn't really have any accuracy because it can't test them over long ranges. Russia is the only country in the world that can hire a hypersonic rocket from one side of the country and have it fly over 11 time zones and hit a pole stuck in the ground, and do it over and over again until they're sure that this is reliable. The only thing that North Korea can do in terms of testing its hypersonic long-range weapons is keep missing Japan, which of course has wonderful psychological effect on the Japanese. But in terms of improving the accuracy of the rockets, well, sure, yeah, you missed Japan yet again. Isn't that wonderful? But where it landed in the ocean, who knows? Um, so the Russians can definitely help with that. They can help with the guidance and the tracking for uh, these wonderful um, Martian artillery that North Korea has. That's what the name of their rockets is, Martian artillery. Rather poetic. So they can get a lot of help with that. The other thing is food security. Russia can just snap its fingers and make sure that North Koreans are very well fed from now on, that there's just no shortage of food at all. So that's good. The other thing is tourism. North Korea has wonderful beaches and is ready to open its arms to Russian tourists. And it's a really short flight to Vladivostok. So Moscow to Vladivostok, it's a long flight. And then you spend the night in a hotel room in Vladivostok. And next day, by early afternoon, you're on the beach in North Korea. And the Russians just love that. So far, there have been just a few parties of tourists from Vladivostok in North Korea, but it's going to be floodgates because Russia is definitely short of nice beaches, as we have recently discovered. Some of them are a bit dangerous, and North Korea's beaches are extremely well defended. So the Russians will feel very secure there. There are probably some other areas of cooperation. The North Koreans, a lot of them know Russian still, and they love Russian culture and Russian music. So I expect a lot of North Koreans will be coming over to study in places like Moscow and St. Petersburg. And so there'll be a steady stream of that. And in general, I think that this is a really good country for Russia to cooperate with because Russia saved North Korea. If it wasn't for Russia, specifically for Russian aviation, the Americans would have destroyed it. But the way it was, the Russians, or the Soviets at the time, knocked some absolutely stunningly ridiculous number of American aircraft out of the air, and the Americans were forced to retreat and lick their wounds. So the North Koreans have definitely not forgotten that and are still, to this day, most grateful to Russia for saving them. And so there's a very large credit of goodwill to collect.
We know that Prime Minister of India is going to be in Russia, Modi. How do you see the current phase of the cooperation between Russia and India? Lavrov, in his recent talk, he says that they're trying to strengthen the cooperation between Russia, China, and India. And what's your take on this?
Well, these are the three huge, powerful Eurasian countries that will pretty much rule the world moving forward once the United States is out of the picture. Right now, the biggest economies in the world are China, number one, India, number two, the United States, number three, and Russia, number four. So the United States is probably not long for this world, as I've indicated. You know, its finances are in such a mess that it will probably kind of wink out of existence. And so it'll be China, India, and Russia at the top of the world, pretty much cooperating together and ruling Eurasia and extending its influence on Africa and Latin America as well. So it is very important for these three countries to have very, very tight very well organized relationships. And the fact that Modi, after being reelected, his first trip is to Moscow. It's just a one-day trip, but still is indicative of the fact that they're recognizing this fact that all of these little tiffs and misunderstandings that India and China had over the years have to be put aside, because it's these three that have to work things out, not just for themselves, but for the rest of the world.
Yeah, just we have to consider the history between Russia and India, which is so strong, which is so important in this cooperation.
Well, there are some problems to sort out. One of the biggest problems is that Russian exports to India are 10 times the size of India's exports to Russia. Now, some of the trade is quite impressive. So the pharmaceutical business in India is important, and there are a lot of pharmaceuticals that Russia imports from India. The electronics industry in Russia is very important, and India imports a lot of electronics. But the biggest chunk of it is oil, and how to work out the balance of trade, given that Russia is just stacking up rupees, but India doesn't really convert rupees very easily, and there's nothing that Russia can buy with those rupees. So they're just piling up. That's a big problem that they have to sort out. So I think at this meeting, they're just basically going to haggle over what Russia should do with this pile of rupees.
Yeah. I just before wrapping up, I just don't understand why the European Union don't consider the problems that they would face in the future, and they're facing right now. If they want to get gas and oil from Turkey, from India, higher prices, it's unbelievable. They're just losing their minds.
They are. They are. A lot of the recent sanctions that they imposed were just insane. They imposed sanctions on a Russian children's camp. And the cleverest bit of sanctions they imposed is that it is no longer legal to use European ports as transshipment points for Russian liquefied natural gas, which means that Russia will do its best to bypass Europe as far as natural gas shipments altogether, and will work very hard at achieving that, in which case there won't be any natural gas for Europe at all. Not American, not Russian. What are they going to do? Freeze?